Well, look who is back. Thirsty for knowledge, you want more. I like that. I'm just kidding. Fahir here from awesometudes.com, and I want to talk about a concept that is gonna allow us to control the workflow of our games and programs if we create programs or apps. And that concept is called conditional statements. We already created one in our pumpkin class, and I use it as an example. This right here, this if statement, that's a conditional statement. It's if. We are asking if this happened, then do this. So how does it go? Well, we type if, and then we type open close parentheses, open close curly brackets. The condition that we put inside of these parentheses needs to evaluate to be true if we want to execute the code that's right here between these curly brackets. So if we want to execute the code that's right here, we do need this statement to be true. So we can simply type here true, which is a Boolean variable. And I told you that when we talked about Booleans, this right here, we are comparing our position y. If it's less than -10, that will either be true or it will be false. And I can go here and I can type print, the statement is true. If I go here in Unity and run our game, we're going to see the statement is true being printed in our console. I'm going to clear it and go back. And if I set it to false, this will not be printed. If I go here and rerun our app or game, nothing is being printed. It says unreachable code. And in fact, it is true. This is unreachable code. False will always be false, and we will never execute the code that's right here. Let's take a different approach. We have something called comparison operators that we can use, and we saw that this one right here, this less than sign, is called a comparison operator. So we can have int a, which is 6, and int b, not ebt, it's int b, which is 3, for example. And here, instead of using false right away, I can simply say or ask if a is greater than b. So if a is greater than b, we can type here a is greater than not dab, man, I'm not dabbing here, than b. So if this is true, and in this case it will be because 6 is greater than 3, we can go here and we can print this in the console. So a is greater or greater than b. So this is it. This is called a conditional statement. And of course, we have more of these comparison operators. We have less than, but now it will be false because, well, a or 6 is not less than 3. In this case, if we want to have more conditions, let's say, for example, if a is actually not lower than b, but we want to execute something if that is, well, if that happens, what we can do, instead of us using this right here, going here and typing, okay, if a is not less than b, then a is maybe greater than b, and then we can execute some code here. No, this is the wrong way to approach it. We have something called an else statement, and this is called if-else statement. So here, if a is not less than b, then we will not execute this code. If this right here is not true, then we will not execute the code. But we want to execute some other code, then we can use else, which means the same way as you read it. Just read this and it will be clear to you. If a is less than b, execute the code that is here. If a is not less than b, else execute the code that is here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm simply going to copy and paste it. A is not lower than b. So if a is not lower than b, then we are going to go into the else statement and print this in the console. And I can go here, I can run the game, and we're going to see a is not lower than b. Why? Well, because 6, which is a, is not lower than 3, which is b. We also have some other other comparison operators. And we can do it like this. Let's say we test if a is less than b, but we also want to test, okay, if a is then equal to b, and if a is greater than b, then how we can test that? Well, we can type else if, instead of typing only else, so not only typing else, we can type else if and give it another condition to check it out. And again, we need parentheses, open close parentheses, and here we need to put that other condition. So we want to test if A is less than B. If that's not true, then test if A is equal to B. And we test that by using double equal sign. Don't compare or don't confuse double equals with a single equal sign. What is the difference between them? Well, a single equal sign assigns this value to this variable. So A is equal to 6, meaning the value of A is 6. But if A double equals B, that means test if A, or the value that's inside of A, if that value is equal to B. So if this is also not true, we want to test if A is greater than B, then we're also going to say else if A is greater than B, then what we can do here, execute the code, of course. A is lower than B, we're going to print that here. A is equal to B, not than, but to. So equal to B, and here we can say A is not, or actually A is greater. Here we need to say greater than B, or not lower. If it's not lower, then it's greater, but it can be equal to. So what do you think, which one of these is going to execute? Well, it's going to execute this one, and we can test it right now. I'm going to simply clear everything here in the console, run the app, and we're going to say A is greater than B, and if I double tap it, it's going to point me to this line of code. Why? Well, because first, we try to test if A is less than B, which is not true because 6 is not less than 3. Then we tested, okay, else if A is equal to B, meaning if this value here is equal to this value here, which is also not true, 6 is not equal to 3. Well, then test else if A is greater than B. We can also do something like this. We can test if a value is less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. So I can go here and I can type if A is lower than B, but I want to test it if A is lower or equal to B. I can also add here the equal sign, and this right here means if it's less than or equal to. And I can also add here the equal sign, and this means if it's greater than or equal to. So it will be true if we put here 6, then we are going to say A is lower than B, or it is equal to B. And we can do the same thing here. We can just copy this right here and put it right here because it will be the same result. A is either greater than B or it is equal to. So this right here will be true if A is 6 or greater than 6. And in this case, it will be true if A is 6 or lower than 6. And what do you think, which of these is going to execute? Let's check it out. And I will explain you how this works. So when I run the game, we're going to see A is lower than B or equal to B. This one is not executed. Why? Well, these conditional statements are tested like this. So we first test this one, then this one, then this one. But actually, if this one is true, the first one that is tested, if it's true, all others are skipped. Even if the second one is tested and it's true, all others below it will be skipped. No matter how many if-else statements you have below, if one of them is true, all others that are below that one that are true will be skipped. So in this case, this one is true, but also this one could be true because A is either greater or equal to B. This will only be false if A is lower than B, and this will only be false if A is greater than B. So if I put here 7, we're going to see that A is greater than B or equal to B. And if I run our app right now, we're going to see A is greater than B or it's equal to B. Why? Because A is 7, it's greater, and this one is not executed because, well, it's not lower or equal to. And this is my point. So if this one is true and it's executed, all others are ignored. Now we can also have statements like this. So let's say I'm only testing if A is, let's say, lower than B, or if A is greater than B. So I'm only testing these two, but they can be equal. I'm not testing that. They can be equal to. And I can say here A is lower than B. And I'm going to remove this one. And here I'm going to say A is greater than B. So only one of these two can be tested. And if I go here and try to run this, nothing will be printed here in the console because A is neither greater than or it is lower than. It is actually equal to. Now, instead of us typing here else if A is equal to B, because there will be situations where you only have two conditionals and you have the third one as a default one. What does that mean? That means if this one is not true and this one is not true, then execute this one. So execute it 100%. And here I can simply go and type A is not greater than B, nor is it lower than B, like this. And if I go here in Unity and I hit the play button, we are going to see A is not greater than B, nor is it lower than B. This one acts as an default state, meaning if nothing above is true and nothing above executes, then execute whatever it is here. Because sometimes you will have these types of statements or these types of situations in your game where you want something to be executed no matter what. So if the conditionals above else are not true and don't execute, then execute whatever it is here. We also have one more conditional statement, which is called switch in case, which I'm going to show you right now. It is similar to if statements, and it works like this. We type switch, open close parentheses, open close curly brackets. And we need to give it a conditional here in the switch. Let's say we go here and we type int a is equal to 6. And we put a because we want to test a inside of the switch statement. This is also called switch in case. Why switch in case? Because now for this tester here, or the variable that we want to test, we write cases. So let's say case 1, then colon, and then we type here break. And this can go over and over again. So let me just put it right here. And in case if you're wondering how am I doing this, moving it like this and this, I'm simply holding shift and then tab to move it backwards. So to tab it backwards and only selecting them and pressing tab to move them forward. And I'm gonna write or command V and command V one more time. And let me just move them here. And let's say, I don't know, 5 and 6. What does this mean right here? So this means that we have created a variable A and we want to test it. So switch and we are testing A. These cases are actually the values of this variable. So we're testing case 1, but actually here we are asking if this variable A is equal to 1, if this variable A is equal to 5, and if it's equal to 6. Now, of course, 6 is gonna be printed. So here I'm gonna say print, and I am gonna write A is equal to 6. I don't even care about these because, well, A is 6 and we know that's gonna work. But if I go here and hit run, we're gonna see A is equal to 6. So we are testing the condition, or we are testing, apparently, MonoDevelop likes this to be back and I'm gonna allow it. So we are testing the value of the variable that's here inside of these parentheses. So in this case, this is an integer, but this can easily be a float. It can be a string, but you will type here the values of the variable that you are testing. So for example, if this is a string, so if we go here, string name is equal to Carl, like this, and you type here name, then instead of 1, you're gonna type, let's say we're testing if the name is Kenny, then we're gonna test here again as a string if the name is Carl and if the name is John, so on and so forth. This is just showing you that we are not only depending on integers. I'm just using that as an example. So here again, we are testing this int a variable, and we're testing its values. Notice this break right here. This break means break out of the cases, or break out of the switch in case statement. As soon as we hit one of these cases that are true and execute the code, of course, what we put between this case and this break, so this one right here, this is our code. Whatever we put here, if this case is true, what's in here will be executed. And when we execute all of the code and hit the break statement, automatically we're going to break out of the switch in case, even if that case is number 1. So if I go here and move case 6 right here at the top, and even if I have these right here, so if I have this right here is equal to 1, and here it's going to be equal to 5, not 65, but 5. even if we have these here, again, what is going to be printed in the console, a is equal to 6. Notice here, a is equal to 6. We don't even bother, same as with the if statement. If the first or the second or the third if statement is true, all below it, all other statements that are below it will not be even tested. And in this case also, even if I type here, but we cannot actually do that here. We cannot type case 6 2 times. We can only type it once. If we go here, we will see a problem. Because we can only test one case once. We cannot test the same case multiple times. But even if we could, then this first one will only execute, and then we will use the break or hit the break statement and break out of, well, switching case. Now what happens if we say here case 3, and here I'm going to say is equal to 3. And I try to run this, and we are going to see nothing printed here in the console. This right here was printed before, which you just saw, but nothing is printing in the console. Can we make something like this else right here? Actually, we can, and that is the default case. So we can simply type default, open these parentheses, or excuse me, not parentheses, but colons, and then type below it break, like this. And I'm simply going to use this one right here, and I'm going to say no case is executed. Instead, default is executed. And this is it. If I go back, run it, we are going to see that no case is executed. Instead, default is executed. So if neither of these cases are true, nothing here executes, but we do want to execute some code, then you will put a default case. Now, some students were asking me in my other courses, what is the difference between if and switch? So if, else, and switch statement, is one better than the other in terms of optimization? In terms of optimization, I'm not sure. But if my rough guess is, then if statement is better in terms of optimization, but I don't think that that's the case. But in most cases, you're going to use if, else statements. And sometimes you will need switch because it will make your code cleaner and better, but these are the conditionals that you can use. So if, else, and switch and case. I am going to comment this out and go back to if statement. What I want to talk here is that we can have nested if, else statements. What does that mean? That means that, let's say we test this condition right here. So if A is lower than B, and even if I put A is 3, which is, well, lower than B, but I want to test it again here. So let's say I want to test, okay, A is lower than B, but is A lower than 2? So I can say, okay, if A is lower than 2, and then if that is true, we are going to proceed inside of this if statement, execute the code or execute more if, else statements. So we can nest them. This is called a nested if statement, or if we add else, it will be nested if, else statement. So we can put them inside of other if, else statements. Now, since this is a game, and especially if we are doing something here in the update function, because that's called every one time per one frame. If we have 60 frames in a second, that's 60 times in a second. Don't nest these too much. So during game development, try to don't nest like 5 or more. I think that this is my rough guess, but you can test that out and see the performance, but don't nest too much. Don't nest too much in game development, especially in the update function. Don't ever do that, or otherwise you will pay the consequences. You will pay the price. Enough about the scary voice, and I hope that I did not scare you so that you lose your focus, because there is one more thing that I want to cover, and that is, I'm quickly gonna comment this out. We can test two conditions at once. How do I mean that? Well, let's say, for example, here, A is 3 and B is 6. Let's say we have int C, which is equal to 2, for example. I can say here if A is lower than B, and that's one condition. And I also want to test if A is greater than C. How can I do that? I can do that in this same condition right here, and I can write these double and sign, and I can say if A is greater than C. So what does this mean right here? This means that if A is less than B, and, so this means and A is greater than C. And this will only be true if and if A is lower than B, so if this right here is true, and if this right here is true. In this case, it will be true because A is lower than 6, or lower than B, which is 6, and A is greater than 2, which is C. So I'm gonna go here, use print, and I am gonna say here in quotes, and I can write, this is true, just so that we test it out and see if it actually works. And if I go here in Unity and run it, we are gonna see that this is true is printed here in the console. If by any chance C is equal to 3, this right here will not be true. And I will prove it to you. I'm gonna clear everything in the console, and I'm gonna run our app and see nothing is printed in the console. Why? Well, I said when we use this double and sign, that means that what's on the left side of it needs to be true. So what's on the left from it needs to be true, and what's on the right from it needs to be true. So A needs to be lower than B, and A needs to be greater than C in order for this complete statement right here to be true. And this is called, I forgot the name of this operator. If I remember, I will tell you in the comments. But anyways, this is double and signed, and you read it like this. If A is less than B, and if A is greater than C, then this is true. We can also use the double pipe sign. So double pipes, these right here, these double pipes, they're called pipes, well, as far as I know. And this means if A is less than B, or if A is greater than C. And in this case, if this is true, then it will be executed right here. If this is also true, it will be executed right here. Even if this is false and this is true, and vice versa, again, this will be executed right here. When we use the double pipe sign or the pipe sign, only one of these statements, so what's on the left from it and what's on the right from it, needs to be true in order for this to work. Now we know that A is not greater than C because C is equal to 3, but we do know that A is lower than B, which is true. So if I go here and rerun our app, we're gonna see this is true being printed in the console. And indeed, we see it. Why? Well, this does not require both of these to be true. This only requires one of these to be true. So we are testing essentially if A is lower than B or if A is greater than C. And if only one of them is true, then we are good to go. But if A is equal to, let's say, how do I need to do this? I can put B to be 3. And only if this is false and this is false, nothing will be printed in the console. And in this case, I'm gonna clear it and run it, and we see that nothing is printed. Why? Well, because B is equal to 3, and 3 is not lower than 3, nor is 3 greater than 3. And that's the reason we did not get any trues here, and that's why this did not get executed. So we have the double and sign, which requires both of these. So both of these sides to be true in order for this to work or to be executed for the code here. And we have the pipe sign or double pipes. And this requires only one of these to be true in order for us to execute this statement right here. And if you're wondering for what we can use if statements in our game, well, just a small example from on the top of my head. In our game, we're gonna have players' lives. So we're gonna test when the player dies. If players' lives are greater than 0, we can continue the game. Otherwise, game over, restart again, pay us again to play our game. Not just kidding. But yeah, this is just one example. We will see that later on when we start building our games. In short, if this can be called in short, this was about conditional statements which allow us to control the workflow of our app. Fahir here from awesometudes.com, and I will catch you guys in the next video.